The Democrats are introducing framework on the Green New Deal.
The Green New Deal.
Green New
The
Deal.
Green New Deal. An environmental group called the Sunrise Movement.
They call themselves the Sunrise Movement.
Bring it on, Koch brothers, because we have an activated sunrise revolution that's taking place.
We have 12 years to radically transform our economy and our society to stop this crisis and protect human civilization as we know it. We'll talk about it like that because that's what it is.
This is not about Republican. This is not about Democrat. This is about humanity. That's why we demand a new Green Deal, and we demand it right now.
All right, everyone. Hello. Good evening. Good evening. So give a little hey, what's up? So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Welcome to the Green New Deal Town Hall. Has anybody seen one of these before or heard anything about the Sunrise Movement here locally? No. Oh, a few folks, our DSA folks, our members. Awesome. Okay, so my name is Bobbi Jo Chavarria, and I am super happy to have you here tonight to discuss the Green Deal. I am very fortunate to be able to represent as one of the co-chairs of the Democratic Socialists of America Inland Empire chapter, and I'm also the vice chair of San Gorgonio Sierra Club that covers both San Bernardino and Riverside County. And so we held this town hall at the beginning of May at the San Bernardino County Museum to great response and discussion. So I know y'all are going to like sort of where this conversation goes, and we're putting, of course, that socialist slant on what it means to be eco-socialist conscious as we embrace the Green New Deal and the policies that will come forward for a transformation. So I want to thank the entire leadership of the DSA IE. Can we give them a quick round of applause? And in particular, our environmental justice working group, led, I think, for the most part by Jacob, and then Johnny kicking in, and Matt and joining us they all joined us in San Bernardino or Redlands with the previous one, and said we need to bring it here to DSA, we need to bring it to Riverside. So thank them for bringing it here. And you're going to get to hear from some of the other folks tonight. But first, we're going to go ahead and get the show started. Now, what happened in May was this wave of hundreds of Green New Deal town halls across the country, and it was coordinated by the Sunrise Movement, which is mostly youth-led organizing in some of the key cities across the country. The Sunrise Movement is building an army of young people to stop climate change and create millions of good jobs in the process. And they've grown up with the frightening reality that the stable climate human civilization has depended on for millennia could crumble within our lifetimes. So through the Sunrise Movement, we're transforming their anger, and as parents of them, and their anger and frustration at witnessing really a lifetime of political inaction on climate into a mass movement to pass a Green New Deal for America. In October 2018, a UN climate scientist put out a groundbreaking report that told us we have 12 years to transition our economy off fossil fuels to avoid global social collapse. But fossil fuel billionaires and the politicians they employ are driving us toward catastrophe. They're willing to put millions of lives at risk so they can maintain their record profits. And I just remembered, Matt, you probably need a copy of you have it. And there's another one up here, Jacob. Okay? They're willing to put millions of lives at risk for their profits. How many of you think that's a good idea? Yeah, all right. Didn't think so. So this is an historic moment. When the Green New Deal was catapulted to the center of American politics in November 2018, the Sunrise Movement leaped into that once-in-a-lifetime window of opportunity to take action on climate change. And so I'm glad that you're all here to learn more. I was really pleased back in May that when my son, we came straight from his open house, he's in 4th grade, and actually helped participate. This is a movement for our children, and really rightfully so. We should follow their lead wherever we can. So we are building a Sunrise Movement here in the Inland Empire. So if you know some young folks, we would love to help them take leadership and tell us what moves them and what actions we need to take here locally. So part 1 of our agenda we'll talk about what we're going to go through today. So it's going to run about 2 hours, but that does give some time for some conversation and some Q&A. And we'll begin by talking about the impacts of climate change and economic inequality, discuss who's responsible for the crisis, and then discuss the Green New Deal, what's in it and what it means for our lives and our society. And then we'll close out with discussing what it will take to see the Green New Deal into law. So now I'm going to play 2 short films sharing the stories of young leaders today.
My name is Norton, and I'm 18 years old. This is how climate change and pollution has affected me. One of my most distinct memories growing up in Detroit is going south on I-75. Smelling the pollution coming from Marathon and seeing the smoke and the fire on the freeway. I remember trying to hold my breath as long as I could, but eventually you have to breathe in. I've lived in Detroit my whole life. We bounced around a lot when I was a kid. We couldn't always afford to pay rent, and neither could a lot of my friends and family. I know that the planet is on a path towards destruction, and I know that it's caused by the same people who produce the smells and the smoke on the freeway. Poor people, minorities, and young people like me are facing violence and threats in our lives every day from a system that treats us like resources to be extracted.
So this is my old neighborhood. The wall that separates Detroit and Grosse Pointe over there was a big site for dumpers. Like business owners usually would come and you would see them dumping their trash, their tires or roof shingles. These houses are all built, 50, some of them even 100 years ago across the city, and all of them are built with the methods of, asbestos, lead. In our own house, we had lead paint chips, and whenever these houses get knocked down and burned down, the neighborhood is affected by that. We breathe that air in.
I see these forces of oppression so clearly. I've come to realize, like a lot of young people, that it's our economy. An economy ruled by profit. An economy that needs our environment to be disposable and needs people to be disposable. At the same time, I was seeing videos of young people across the country going to their elected officials and demanding action on the climate and pollution. I was arrested with other activists for sitting in at Nancy Pelosi's office and demanding a Green New Deal. Our generation is sick of a system that leaves us with no future and no hope for a better life. It's not you and me that has to change. It's the system that allows companies, shareholders, and billionaires to destroy our planet. The Sunrise Movement, to me, is about elevating young people to fight on the front lines of building a new, more just, more fair future. I've lived in pollution, in poverty, in climate change my whole life. As long as those things exist, I'll continue to struggle.
I wanted to ask if there is a young person or a couple of young folks out there that would want to take a little bit of ownership of tonight's presentation. We do have another copy of the presentation. If you want to, you can flip through it and see maybe one or two, 3 slides that you would like to present or read or talk about. You are totally welcome to do that. Just the presentation is here. Please feel free to come and grab it, and then we'll have you up on the podium, and you can present this part as well. And I would think that you'd pick something that speaks to you, and there's a lot of good conversation in this presentation. So I want to make that invitation to any of the young folks out there. And young could be as young as, I am 47, so if you're 46, you are young to me. But as young, again, my son was in 4th grade, he was 10, so anywhere between 10 and 47, you are welcome to please come and grab the presentation and take it and make this movement your own.
My name is Lily, and I'm 15. This is how climate change and pollution has affected my life. Growing up in eastern Kentucky is all about contrast. Contrast between lush Appalachian nature and sprawling extraction projects. I spent my childhood hiking and backpacking and developed a passion for the environment, the mountains, the woods. As I got older, I began to see how my environment was changing around me. We've gone from a deciduous forest to a temperate rainforest just in my lifetime. We've had 2 tornadoes in the last 6 years. Northeast Kentucky is seeing acid rain from all the mining projects, and the water is undrinkable in many communities. Climate change represents an existential fear all people my age share. Instead of worrying about things like college or what I want to do someday, I'm forced to worry about rising sea levels, more and more weather-related natural disasters, increasing famine and food insecurity. I joined Sunrise, and within weeks, I was on a bus with 70 other young people from Kentucky to demand Nancy Pelosi support a Green New Deal. When I came back to Kentucky, we started a Sunrise Hub here and immediately started organizing. Other young people I've met through Sunrise understand that we can't afford business as usual. We understand that we need massive, transformative change to our economy and politics in order for my generation to have any chance of a livable future. Corporations in eastern Kentucky accelerated climate change, and now our communities will be some of the most severely impacted. In just my lifetime, I've seen the climate change drastically. This is the fight of our lives, and I'm not going away anytime soon.
Give those 2 young leaders a hand. I'm sure their spirit will fill you. So we're all here because we know that climate change is hurting everyone, everywhere, and right now. We all have something to lose to climate change, and we all have something that we're fighting for. So I want you to now, this is your first chance to kind of meet your neighbor, turn to some people next to you and discuss what brought you into the room today. How are you seeing the impacts of climate change, pollution, and economic inequality right here in the IE, here in Riverside, in your life and in your community? So let's take a couple of minutes, say hi, neighbor, and what brought you here today. Okay, so let's come back to the big group. And if anybody has a compelling story that they heard from their neighbor and would want to share that, please raise your hand and or just shout it out, or I can volunteer somebody. So if you heard a story that was really compelling to you that your neighbor shared, would you stand and share it with us?
Everybody, my name's Anabelle. One of the things that my neighbor Irene mentioned was how in Redondo Beach, the ExxonMobil refinery, many people that lived around the refinery all died of cancer. So my brother's high school friends also lived near a refinery, and his mom and his sisters already died of cancer. So he's the only one that's alive in his family. So I know that that's happened to a lot of people. And it's crazy that they just voted in Redondo Beach apparently to be able to release acid into the environment, and that is ridiculous. So
Wow.
it's affecting people's health, you know?
So we know who's responsible. It's fossil fuel CEOs and corrupt politicians. We know that. And we know that it goes to more, but let's figure out what is happening. Fossil fuel executives have mounted a deliberate, decades-long strategy to protect their profits. And they don't care whose community they run over. They don't care who works in their factories and doesn't live a full and healthy life because of what they're getting exposed to. And they don't care how many people get left behind as CEOs become billionaires and take off with the profits, and workers and community members can barely survive. So we talked about the impacts of climate change and what we need to do to stop it. It's going to take massive government action to transform our energy, food, and transport systems. We need our city, state, and federal government officials to team up and work to pass many bills at all levels of government to address this crisis and move our communities forward. But we're not on track to do any of it. The problem is fossil fuel CEOs and corrupt politicians are blocking climate action. They've mounted a decades-long strategy to protect their profits and block progress on climate every step of the way. In the air in any small room, there's a soda can volume of carbon dioxide gas that is attributable to Chevron. So why are they doing this? Since 1988, 70% of global GHG emissions can be traced back to just 100 fossil fuel producers, and over half of our global emissions to just 25 producers, including Exxon, Shell, BP, Chevron, and ConocoPhillips. Does anybody work in the this fossil fuel industry? You know, before I start talking smack. No, the point is, if climate action at every level of government was possible, these guys wouldn't be multi-billionaires anymore. So they decided something else should be common sense: climate denialism. How many of you heard about climate denialism, right? Climate deniers. So their strategy is in three phases: deceive the people, buy out politicians, and consolidate power in government. We're going to go one by one through these things to look at how fossil fuel billionaires have redefined our common sense to make climate inaction and denialism the status quo. So first off, deceive the people. We're going to look at ExxonMobil. They're the largest private oil company in the world. They're not the only group doing this, but they are an example. So in 1978, as a company full of scientists, Exxon actually had cutting-edge climate research. At the point, they were already saying we only had 5 to 10 years left before we had to make a change in course. In 1978, I'm 47, I was 7 at the time. Jump forward to 1997. They changed their mind, putting their money and their mouths toward denying the threat of climate change that their own scientists had once warned of. They funded the right-wing think tanks and fossil front groups that so effectively sowed lies and doubt. As science and public outrage caught up to them, they had to change their tune again. And by 2007, they said that climate change was real, but that demand for oil would always rise, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. And of course, they kept funding the deniers on their side. So here's another example. Who knows who these guys are? That's right, these are the Koch brothers. I shared that, my son was reading this. This was the page that he picked, and he called them the Koch brothers, as I often have. Their company, Koch Industries, it makes money from refining oil. coal-fired power plants, pipelines, and other such industries. They have a combined net worth of over $100 billion, and that's 100 billion reasons to block government action on climate. They will lose that money if we act to stop climate change. And with $100 billion, they have a lot of money to spare. So like Exxon, the Koch brothers have spent millions of dollars funding climate denial, over 127 million to be precise, between 1997 and 2017. And that's not all. In 2018, Exxon and Koch Industries, they were two companies that spent the most money on oil and gas lobbying, which brings us to fossil fuels and the CEO's second strategy, buy out the politician. Money in politics. And the 28ers are here. If you don't know about how to get money out of politics, talk to the 28ers. The Kochs organize other billionaires and millionaires to spend money in our elections. So does anybody know how much the Koch network spent to influence the elections in 2016? Almost $2 billion? Probably we're overshooting. 1.5. They actually spent $750 million, so about half of that, right? $750 million. They didn't spend much at all on the presidential race. That was on the congressional and statewide races to maintain control, right? So the spending in 2016, they didn't spend as much as the Democratic and Republican parties, but they're in the same league. So it's like a third party is influencing our politics. This is unprecedented in American politics. The result of all this spending is that any Republican who takes a moderate position on climate change, or lots of other things that matter, they get hit with attack ads and a challenger for the upcoming primary. And even plenty of Democrats are taking money from fossil fuel interests, either in the Koch network or elsewhere. There's plenty of dirty money to go around. They've been building up their network for decades, and their spending is at an all-time high, and it's paying off. Right? So now we have the two prongs of their three-part strategy. They deceive the public, and they're buying out our politicians. They're buying political power. These two things have drastically shifted our political common sense. And here we get to the third part of the billionaires' three-part strategy: consolidate power within the government. Trump's government is ripe with fossil fuel money beneficiaries. This is Mike Pompeo, our Secretary of State, his nickname, the Congressman from Koch. He was able to move into government because of money from the Koch brothers. He's their biggest recipient, and now he's in charge of representing the United States, or our interests, and the biggest economy in the world, in a world where his benefactors have many interests. You think he's fighting for U.S. interests or Koch interests? So now we understand their three-pronged strategy. It comes to blocking climate action. We're not just talking about fossil fuel CEOs. The billionaire class as a whole is also wrecking the economy and environment in all kinds of ways. Big banks are funneling more and more money into dirty energy, hundreds of billions last year. And together, Google, Microsoft, and Amazon have signed deals worth billions to provide big oil with data management services. They're actually helping fossil fuel producers get more oil out of the ground at a time when we should be doing the exact opposite. In fact, these same giant corporations are trying to extract whatever they can from us: labor, debt, data, and even our time and attention. The supposedly green billionaires are no exception. Tesla's Elon Musk is notorious for union busting and for mercilessly overworking his employees in dangerous conditions. And student debt just keeps growing. As a parent of young children, we're living in a time of profound crisis for the climate and the economy. Workers are working longer and harder without higher wages, and housing and education costs keep climbing. Debt and income inequality have skyrocketed. Meanwhile, the billionaire class hoards even more wealth and power at the top. So we saw that student loans, mortgages. Anybody in debt a little bit? So what are they saying about the Green Deal, the Green New Deal? The GOP elites wasted no time in talking to news outlets and social media, calling the Green New Deal an extreme socialist fantasy that would bankrupt the country. The big banks and other corporations have chimed in too. And it's kind of ridiculous considering how much money billionaires and fossil fuel companies have extracted from our government in the form of tax cuts and fossil fuel subsidies. Internationally, governments are providing nearly $1 trillion annually in fossil fuel subsidies. And in the United States alone, these subsidies are on the order of $10 billion to $52 billion annually. And that's not even including costs related to the climate and local health and environmental impacts. Dollar for dollar, we know that renewable energy employs far more people than oil and gas and coal. Can you imagine if all that money was used to help make our communities healthier and safer and through this transition? Hi. We had passers-by. Okay, so the Green New Deal, this is a quote. Of course, the GOP elites aren't torn up about how we're going to pay for the Green New Deal. It's no coincidence that the pundits and politicians who've been trying to block the Green New Deal from day one are the same ones stoking the flames of racist, anti-immigrant violence in this country. Whether it's Trump or newly ascendant extremist parties across North America and Europe, right-wing elites are explicitly fusing racism, xenophobia, and climate denial into a single agenda. This is part of a long history that elites have used racism to divide the working class, progressive majority. It's always been about protecting wealth and the power of the rich and the white. Pair up right now with someone near you, and if you want to return to your neighbor that you're getting to know or someone new, how are you seeing racism being used to divide people and block progressive action right now? And you can share as little or as much as you want and how it's affecting you personally, but how are you seeing it out in the community, if that's a safer question for yourself. And go ahead and take a couple of minutes, and then we'll hear from you all some of the answers. Okay, who has an answer that they'd like to shout out about how we've seen racism impact this discussion?
We were talking about the false binary that Donald Trump sends up, like that it's going to take away jobs. Even if there's climate change, it'll take away jobs, as if the Green New Deal or environmental policy won't create jobs. And now Klein talks about how Native American communities have created a lot of good jobs with solar panel training that have created far more jobs in the pipeline. In the pipeline, the Keystone Pipeline created maybe 600 jobs for 6 months, right? And so that the amount of jobs that are going into solar power is far stronger than that. And it's just a false binary, as if it's a white person's interest and it's not our collective interest, because we know environmentalism is almost always racist in outcome. Okay, so did y'all hear that? So that green energy jobs like solar, doing retrofitting of solar panels and solar energy, like even with indigenous folks who are having those programs, that has created more jobs than the temporary 6-month, 600 jobs that the Dakota Access Pipeline was touted as, being totally necessary for all these great jobs. And then Matt shared that but the racist connotation was that we just have to serve the needs of rich white people or white people, no matter that it runs through sacred land of indigenous folks, that it damages. Yeah.
Use working class people as like pieces. Oh, they're going to be the most affected. They're going to lose their jobs, as if we can't make sustainable jobs. And they're just using working class people and then getting the brunt of, we're going to get taxed up here, but the workers are the ones that really feel it. And then they're the ones that are most affected anyways.
Exactly right. Yeah, please.
And it just goes
goes to the fear. They want to put fear in workers, you know, like fear of losing your job, and then what are you going to do? Right? Instead of reassuring that we'll train you in something else.
Adjust transition, making sure that no one gets left behind, that we are addressing folks transitioning. So how many of you have ever been like on a neighborhood or community group or discussion or whatever? I normally try to avoid those, but today I accidentally got on one because my cousin responded to something. But I heard over and over and over again, no, but we can only take care of us first, right? And so anybody who's foreign or other, or they, you know what, they need to take care of them and we need to take care of us, as if the line in the dirt makes us inherently more valuable or less valuable than the other, right? And color is being allowed, language, accident of birth is what I shared with my cousin. He goes, you should be lucky that you live in a country. I'm like, no, it shouldn't be luck, right? So all the strategies, thank you so much for sharing, all the strategies that fossil fuel billionaires and corrupt politicians have used in the past are playing right now in opposition to the Green New Deal. They've succeeded in limiting everyone's imagination on what solutions are really possible. And this is no surprise to anybody here, but even the Democrats have been doing that. I'm sorry if I shattered any illusions. But it's a good thing that we've got each other. There was more than 200 town halls in May and more than 1,000 actions across the country since then, asking or demanding that the DNC change the debate and include a whole debate on climate change. Not just one or two questions, but a whole debate about what are these candidates' plans moving forward to transform our economy and address the danger that we're in. So we have 11 years now. 11 years now. And I went to the DNC, or not to the DNC, the California Democratic Party convention, and I have a couple of delegates here with me. The Sunrise Movement was there, and they were singing and they were chanting and they hit every caucus and they presented their information and demanded a climate discussion. They didn't have the billions of dollars, but they had the people and the heart and the children who were emphasizing that it's 11 years. And some kids were carrying signs that says, I will be 18 when this happens, as my son Ezra will be 18, 11 years. I'm asking him to go into adulthood not knowing if he's going to have an earth that is habitable for a healthy, long life. So we know the Green New Deal can change everything. Racism and the exploitation of people and the planet are two key pillars in a culture that allows billionaires and corporations to amass more and more wealth while everyday people struggle to survive. So let's hear that again. Racism and the exploitation of people and the planet are the two key pillars that allows the billionaires and the corporations to amass more and more wealth while everyday people struggle to survive. The two pillars that we need to topple if we're going to win, and they're both things that the Green New Deal takes big steps to address. And that's why the billionaire class is freaking out about the Green New Deal, because there's finally a real solution on the table. And how many of you have seen the vision of a Green New Deal? How many? So a few. So some of you haven't. So just sit back and enjoy this dream, this vision that we together can create starting today.
The bullet train from New York to DC. It always brings me back to when I first started making this commute. In 2019, I was a freshman in the most diverse Congress in history, Up to that point, it was a critical time. I'll never forget the children in our community. They were so inspired to see this new class of politicians who reflected them, navigating the halls of power. It's often said, you can't be what you can't see. And for the first time, they saw themselves. I think there was something similar with the Green New Deal. We knew that we needed to save the planet and that we had all the technology to do it. But people were scared. They said it was too big, too fast, not practical. I think that's because they just couldn't picture it yet. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start with how we got here. 1977, New York. A senior scientist named James Black made a presentation about how burning fossil fuels could eventually lead to global temperatures rising 4 or 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Within 2 years, one of the world's biggest supertankers was outfitted with a state-of-the-art lab to measure CO2 in the ocean, gathering more data about global warming. Guess who was doing all of this research? ExxonMobil, the oil and gas company. Oh yeah, Exxon knew this whole time, as did our politicians. 10 years later, James Hansen, NASA's top climate scientist, told Congress he was 99% certain that global warming was happening and caused by humans. That was 1988, the year before I was even born. So did Exxon listen to the science, including their own? Did they change business models, invest in renewables? No, the opposite. They knew and they doubled down. They and others spent millions setting up a network of lobby groups and think tanks to create doubt and denial about climate change. It was an effort designed to attack and dispute the very kind of science they themselves had been doing. And it worked. Politicians went to bat for fossil fuels, and these massive corporations kept digging and mining, drilling and fracking like there was no tomorrow. America became the biggest producer and consumer of oil in the world. Fossil fuel companies made hundreds of billions, while the public paid the lion's share to clean up their disasters. We lost a generation of time we'll never get back. Entire species will never get back. Natural wonders gone forever. And in 2017, Hurricane Maria destroyed the place where my family was from, Puerto Rico. It was like a climate bomb. It took as many American lives as 9/11. And in the next year, when I was elected to Congress, the world's leading climate scientists declared another emergency. They told us that we had 12 years left to cut our emissions in half, or hundreds of millions of people would be more likely to face food and water shortages, poverty, and death. 12 years to change everything. How we got around, how we fed ourselves, how we made our stuff, how we lived and worked, everything. The only way to do it was to transform our economy, which we already knew was broken, since the vast majority of wealth was going to just a small handful of people, and most folks were falling further and further behind. It was a true turning point. Lots of people gave up. They said we were doomed. But some of us remembered that as a nation, we'd been in peril before. The Great Depression, World War II. We knew from our history how to pull together to overcome impossible odds. And at the very least, we owed it to our children to try. The wave began when Democrats took back the House in 2018, and then the Senate and the White House in 2020, and launched the decade of the Green New Deal, a flurry of legislation that kicked off our social and ecological transformation to save the planet. It was the kind of swing-for-the-fence ambition we needed. Finally, we were entertaining solutions on the scale of the crises we faced without leaving anyone behind. That included Medicare for All, the most popular social program in American history. We also introduced the federal jobs guarantee, a public option including dignified living wages for work. Funnily enough, the biggest problem in those early years was a labor shortage. We were building a national smart grid, retrofitting every building in America, putting trains like this one all across the country. We needed more workers. That group of kids from my neighborhood were right in the middle of it all, especially this one girl, Ileana. Her first job out of college was with AmeriCorps Climate, restoring wetlands and bayous in coastal Louisiana. Most of her friends were in her union, including some oil workers in transition. They took apart old pipelines and got to work planting mangroves with the same salary and benefits. Of course, when it came to healing the land, we had huge gaps in our knowledge. Luckily, indigenous communities offered generational expertise to help guide the way. Ileana got restless, tried her hand as a solar plant engineer for a while, but eventually made her career in raising the next generation as part of the Universal Child Care Initiative. As it turns out, caring for others is valuable, low-carbon work, and we started paying real money to folks like teachers, domestic workers, and home health aides. Those were years of massive change, and not all of it was good. When Hurricane Sheldon hit southern Florida, parts of Miami went underwater for the last time. But as we battled the floods, fires, and droughts, we knew how lucky we were to have started acting when we did. And we didn't just change the infrastructure, we changed how we did things. We became a society that was not only modern and wealthy, but dignified and humane too. By committing to universal rights like healthcare and meaningful work for all, we stopped being so scared of the future. We stopped being scared of each other, and we found our shared purpose. Ileana heard the call too, and in 2028, she ran for office in the first cycle of publicly funded election campaigns. And now she occupies the seat that I once held. I couldn't be more proud of her, a true child of the Green New Deal. When I think back to my first term in Congress, riding that old school Amtrak in 2019, all of this was still ahead of us. And the first big step was just closing our eyes and imagining it. We can be whatever we have the courage to see.
Give that vision some love and appreciation. So the billionaires have every reason to be freaking out because we are talking about a total transformation on the status quo that has left them and made them very wealthy and leaving the rest of us behind. And this marks the first time that elected officials have put forward a vision of climate action that actually meets the scale of what we need. The Green New Deal is a plan to fix the economy that the billionaires broke, and the policy details are still being worked out, and we're all part of that process. But the broad strokes that are laid out right now from this congressional resolution from Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Ed Markey, that is where we begin, and it's just getting started. House Resolution 109, it says over the next decade, the Green New Deal will engage every American in every community to join in an emergency effort that moves our entire society to 100% clean and renewable energy. For any person who needs work, it will guarantee a family-sustaining job, building the new economy. And for the workers most impacted by these changes, and for the communities most vulnerable to pollution and climate change, the Green New Deal will deliver a transition that leaves no one behind. And make no mistake, this will be a big deal. This will be the biggest transformation since the Franklin Delano Roosevelt's original New Deal, or the remaking of the economy during World War II. If you think about those two historical moments, what made them so important? They were both urgent responses to an existential crisis, a harrowing emergency, just like the climate change crisis we're facing today. And in both cases then, we treated it like one, and we have to do that now. So when we faced the emergency of the Great Depression, the New Deal responded with what FDR called bold, persistent experimentation. The government created dozens of innovative programs for relief, recovery, and reform. They distributed aid for the unemployed. They regulated finance, industry, and agriculture. They created the Social Security system for old age and unemployment insurance, and they protected union rights for the first time. When we faced the emergency of the global fascism in World War II, the government took the reins of the economy. They mandated private industry to produce wartime goods. One giant facility could spit out a B-24 bomber every hour. Auto plants were automatically completely converted for the effort. And wartime agencies established rationing and price controls and put limits on corporate profits. FDR even seized control of companies that refused to cooperate. No wonder they're calling it, right, a socialist takeover. But really what it was a people takeover. Ordinary people shared, sacrificed, and supported each other. A large majority of households grew their own victory gardens, which produced over 40% of the country's vegetables in 1943. And don't forget, as a society, when we decide to take on a crisis with everything we've got, we can pull off the unimaginable. If this isn't another one of those moments, then what possibly could be? The fact is, climate change is an even greater threat than the Great Depression or World War II. It risks not only our lives and not only the future of our society, it threatens the very existence of collective life on this planet. Climate change demands emergency action, and one of the biggest and boldest that we can muster, the kind that can only be led by a massive institution like the federal government and us and our voices forcing it to do the right thing. There's simply no other institution that can change the rules of the game on this kind of timeline. So that explains the scale of the new Green Deal. What about the scope? Climate change is far from the only emergency that we're dealing with, and you really can't isolate it from the other major problems in our society. Systemic racism is an urgent crisis because we have an economy and democracy that functions for the few people who live from wealth, but not for the majority who live from work. Inequality has skyrocketed, and crushing poverty remains a reality in this country. And these crises are all connected. We've covered the fact that the same elites and the same economic and political system are to blame, and the Green New Deal is going to take them on together. So can we do it all in 10 years? And is it really the job of a climate plan? We can, and the Green New Deal must do it all. So let's talk about what it looks like. And we're going to move on to our next, remind me, Matt, to talk about the three major ways the Green New Deal is going to change everything for you, your friends, your family, and every single person in this country. So Matt is the Secretary of the Inland Empire Democratic Socialists of America New Chapter. He has done the brunt of the work organizing us on paper and at the national level. Thank you so much, Matt, for all you're doing, and give him another round of applause. He's going to talk to us about the Green New Deal.
Thank you. Thank you, Bobbi Jo. I'm going to be talking about good jobs for all. So on the other side of this transition, work will be different. The economy will operate on new principles, and everyday life will be transformed, all for the better. Here's the first one. Under the Green New Deal, you'll have secure, fair, and meaningful work. We know that climate action will create millions of jobs. Think about it. In every city and suburb, in every rural county and town, there is a mind-boggling amount of work to do. We'll need people to build wind farms, solar installations, and smart grids, charging stations, electric bus lines, and bullet trains. affordable homes. We have to retrofit and climate-proof every building in the United States. Upgrade and fortify all of our infrastructure. We need to grow healthy, sustainable food in every community in this country. Plant billions of trees, taking carbon from the atmosphere and storing it in the ground where it belongs. Everything I just listed is right there in the Green New Deal resolution, and it only scratches the surface. So right now, I'd like to ask you to find a partner and share what some of this climate work could look like in our community. So does anyone have any particular programs, ideas for local work that we can do to tackle climate change in the Inland Empire? Yeah, Matt.
The Riverside Food Cooperative, which will build local economy. They're going to have a meeting next month to look at building their first building. It will use, it already uses food from local farmers in the area to create local autonomy and sustainability in the area. And of course, that can be built upon larger long-term policies like a community land trust that builds, decommodifies housing at the same time that it creates ecological housing.
Fantastic. Are there any other proposals, any ideas that you had for how we can tackle this locally? Bobbi Jo.
Of course I have an idea. So the Climate Parent campaign with the Sierra Club is pushing forward a campaign to make, to ask every school district, every school to commit to 100% clean energy as soon as possible by passing resolutions and then implementing the programs, the cost savings, and then directing that to education. But I was sharing with Jonny, what that would do is transform our schools into community hubs of the possible and save money and energy and time and wean us off of fossil fuels. I think it inspire the rest of the community to do that. So.
That's an amazing idea, and I can imagine a coalition with the teachers' union to bring that about, bargaining for the common good, bringing some working class power to the issue. Yeah, that's phenomenal. Thanks, Bobbi Jo. So yeah, there's a bunch of new physical stuff to build, but to fight climate change, we also have to get a hell of a lot better at taking care of each other. Teaching, nursing, child and elder care, domestic and agricultural work. It's a good thing that these are all green jobs. In other words, they're examples of the lowest carbon parts of our economy, and the very ones we need to expand. Here's the thing. The people who do so much of this work already, often women of color and migrants, are exploited by the capitalist class and underpaid in today's economy. And even though the wind and solar industries are exploding, those jobs are usually non-union, and they pay far less than the fossil fuel industry does. So green jobs have to be good jobs, and we can't just trust the market to provide them. Do we want everyone to be paid a living wage that can support a family? To have a safe, non-discriminatory workplace and the right to join a union? Healthcare, paid vacation, family and medical leave. Then we have to make it happen. That's why a core component of the Green New Deal is a policy called a job guarantee. That's right. There's so much climate work to be done that the federal government can offer a job to every single American who needs one and participates in this transition. A federal job guarantee will set a floor for wages and benefits. Every employer will have to meet those standards, and their workers will simply leave for the public option. Yeah. So this policy would be life-changing for all of us, and it would be especially uplifting for those communities that deal with the worst aspects of our current economy. Low-income workers, indigenous communities, people of color, migrants, the unhoused, the formerly incarcerated, people with disabilities, and so many more. These communities have been through centuries of oppression, exclusion, and environmental injustice. They're the Americans who have done the least to cause global warming, and yet they're often hit first and worst by climate chaos. With the job guarantee, we can use the power of government to make sure everyone can participate fully in this transition, and that green jobs really are good jobs. Because did you know that the job guarantee was a major demand of the civil rights movement? It was a demand articulated by democratic socialists and civil rights leaders like Bayard Rustin, A. Philip Randolph, and of course, Dr. Martin Luther King. And proponents also look back to the original New Deal, when we faced the ultimate job crisis, the Great Depression of the 1930s. In all three of the areas we're exploring today, we can look to this era for inspiration and for concrete models that we can pick up, adapt, and improve on in order to meet today's emergency. During the New Deal, the government put millions of people to work, transforming our infrastructure, conserving the land, and even making public art. One of its most popular initiatives was the Civilian Conservation Corps. The CCC sent 3 million unemployed young men to the countryside, where they planted more than 2 billion trees and built public parks that last to this day. Another iconic New Deal agency, the Works Progress Administration, spent billions to employ about 8.5 million people on public projects. They did everything from building roads, schools, hospitals, to supervising school lunch programs and immunization drives. Drawing on this history, the job guarantee alone will transform American life as we know it. And let's think for a second of how these major reforms were won. It wasn't the noble aspirations of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It was through working class struggle, the CIO demanding, occupying factories, and challenging the capitalist class. That is the kind of mass movement that we're going to need today if we're going to challenge the fossil fuel industry. So let's zoom out and let's look at the fundamental nature of our economy and see how it will change as well. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Jacob.
All right, hello folks. So we've talked about how the federal government's going to have to step in and do a lot of the stuff here as part of the Green New Deal, a federal jobs guarantee, Medicare for all. But what we don't want to lose sight of here is that this isn't a top-down process. This is bottom-up. This is a public project, which means that us, as members of the public, are going to be the ones who help determine what goes into this Green New Deal. What we don't want to do is impose solutions on communities who may not want them, may not need them, may not work for them. So we're going to have to be flexible and experiment with what ends up becoming out of our Green New Deal. So the first concept I want to talk about here, first concept, energy democracy. Anyone know what energy democracy is? All right, I will tell you. So energy democracy is when we take, in this case, literal electric power out of the hands of the capitalists and distribute it to the people. So electric generation, power production is particularly well suited for this, especially here in Southern California, where we have a vast surplus of sun and sometimes a whole lot of wind, which means that we can use wind generation and solar power generation to have electricity generated by our communities and for our communities by a decentralized network that is out of the hands of the capitalist class. Now, this is not the first time, this isn't a new deal, or I'm sorry, this isn't a new idea. This is part of the original New Deal, the idea of energy democracy. What was the case before the New Deal and into the Great Depression was vast majorities of rural America, especially in the US South, were not hooked up to any sort of electrical grid, and were falling behind economically with the urban and northern parts of the country that were. So the New Deal directly addressed this problem by coming up with the concepts known as energy co-ops, and where these formerly electric private, capitalist, profit-earning electric companies saw no reason to go to these communities, the federal government stepped in and said, we will. And that is what we are trying to accomplish in a new form today. So we have here workers with an energy co-op bringing precious electric lines to people, mostly in poverty, who hadn't had any access to these sorts of things that we consider normal fundamental rights now. Next slide. So here we are. Here's charming father-son scene looking proudly over there, what their community has built, the literal power that their community has brought to themselves, and are not reliant on the whims of those who are just trying to make money to improve their lives. So, not relying on the whims of people who want to make money to improve our lives. There's one long mouthful of a word for this: decommodification. That's right. So I'm going to start by just telling you what a commodity is first. Commodity is anything that's bought and sold on a market. So, if you want to get food, if you want to get healthcare, if you want to get energy or transportation, those are all commodities that you need to buy on a market. But we want an alternative to this framework. And an important concept in eco-socialist thought is getting rid of the commodity model for giving people what they need and going with decommodification. So here we have, that's fine. We got things here, examples of things that would need to be decommodified to make a Green New Deal. So we got food. Food, yeah. Private commodity, you have to actually buy food now to get food. In a Green New Deal, what we could do is create new cooperative models of food growing, such as the Riverside Co-op. That's one example. So we could both produce food that is publicly available to communities that grow it, and to make sure that it is ecologically sustainable food that we're growing, and that the industrial, or hopefully not industrialized, processes we use to make this food won't harm other communities, and that, which is the current case with a lot of food production now. Another thing we could decommodify: transportation. Private transportation cuts people off from access to the things they need, and also produces a lot of bad side effects: air pollution, water pollution, traffic, people just losing time, cities destroyed just to make wider roads. And all this is because of a profit motive, because people with money decided that to get people to get around, they had to pay money to the people who already had money to do it. The Green New Deal and a decommodified transportation network would have free transport that is also ecologically sustainable, because that technology is available right now. It's just that it doesn't make a profit for the people who want profits, which is why we're getting rid of the idea of profit in this way. We could decommodify healthcare. That's what single-payer healthcare is. That's what we're trying to do for Medicare for All. And quickly, if anyone's interested also in Medicare for All, hit up Johnny. We've got canvassing. We can spread the word around. And decommodification kind of sounds like a radical idea, not having to buy the things that you need and just have them provided to you because you're a human being worth dignity. But we have water fountains. People consider water to be a necessity of life. And so we have water that is given to people free of cost when they need it, in public spots, open to anyone, and provided by public pipes. I mean, it's not radical. We're doing this right now. But we have to recognize the shortcomings of what this can lead to. And I'm going to go back to the water fountain specifically for this reason, because as we see here, even just water coming out of a fountain can be twisted and distorted by power dynamics and the specifically racist history of our country. So whatever we do with the Green New Deal, we're going to have to make sure that this situation does not get repeated, that every single person, white, black, however they may racially or ethnically identify themselves, actually has access to the material necessities of a dignified human life. So, next slide. So here we have, again, our hero, AOC, Sheeta Tlaib, talking with constituents. And this point has been made before, but I'm going to reinforce it here. A lot of the worst impacts of climate change, of environmental degradation, of capitalist exploitation falls on the poor, women, and people of color, which means that poor, women, and people of color are going to be instrumental in designing and shaping what a just Green New Deal will actually look like in the future. Yes, so here I'll just read this quote for you. A Green New Deal must be developed through transparent and inclusive consultation, collaboration, and partnership with frontline and vulnerable communities, labor unions, worker co-ops, civil society groups, academia, and businesses. This is going to have to be a bottom-up solution. We cannot rely on people who may have ulterior motives or just don't feel like listening to the wills of the people they're actually serving. It is up to us to shape what an ecologically sustainable, racially inclusive, and economically just Green New Deal will actually look like. And so we hope that you will all join us in organizing for this idea. And coming up to speak next, I believe, will be Jonny, who will come and speak about what we are going to do here in the future. Thank you.
Howdy, folks. I'm Jonny Miller. I'd like to talk about the third point here, a good life for all. Those are the democratic values of the Green New Deal. And this vision says a lot more about values, about the life we think each and every one of us deserves to lead. So that's our third and final theme. As we've seen, the fossil fuel economy squeezes everything it can from working people and the planet, all to maximize the profits and power and to keep them concentrated in the hands of the 1%. The Green New Deal builds a society based on radically different values, like cooperation, not competition. Rather than fueling endless consumption, keeping us isolated, plugged in, and stressed out, and numb to the violence that's all around us, the Green New Deal prizes community and solidarity. Instead of pitting us against each other for the benefit of the few, it lifts up the many, prioritizing all of our needs and dreams. In this vision of society, things like healthcare, education, affordable housing, and meaningful work are treated as universal rights. So that brings us to Mr. FDR and his second Bill of Rights here. And FDR recognized that these things are foundations to a good life. And that if you don't have them, you can't really be free. Raise your hands if you saw Bernie Sanders' speech on democratic socialism. Awesome, pretty much everybody. One of the things that really struck me about that was he was like, if you don't have these things, you can't be free. And he just kind of went through all of them, right? Yeah, right? So what does it mean to say we live in America, the land of the free, and you don't have a job, or you don't have adequate wage and a decent living? I didn't have this part on the script, but Bobbi Jo has been really awesome about kind of sharing her personal life. And when we were doing a little back and forth there, she asked me, oh, do you have kids? And I was like, no. And, you know, people usually ask me, why don't you have kids? And then that's really awkward. But I think it's probably something pretty common about, for most of my generation, is I am married, but I can't afford to have kids. I have a job that just pays enough, you know, to pay the basic bills, but one of those kind of foundational human things, you know, being able to see your genes continue on past you, maybe something I'll never do. And one of the reasons is because I didn't get a college degree. And why didn't I get a college degree? Because I can't afford that. So this is one of the things that's included here in the Green New Deal. I think you all can kind of relate to that, or many of you. But I was kind of hoping we can kind of shout them all out together since we have them all listed up here on the screen. So when I say number one, you'll say a job. Number two, an adequate wage and a decent living. Number three, a decent home. Number four, medical care. Medical care for all, right? Medicare for all. Number five, economic protection during sickness, accident, old age, or unemployment. And number 6, a good education. Thank you for joining in with that. That's right. That's exactly what FDR argued towards the end of World War II, all the way back in World War II, and here we are, when he proposed his second Bill of Rights. Well, the Green New Deal wants to secure all of these rights and freedoms. In fact, it even goes further by calling for things like ample leisure time. Yeah. And my roses. Right? And universal access to healthy food and nature. Like we've been talking about these food co-ops and whatnot. How many of us actually get time to go away and just spend time in nature? I try to get up to the mountains once a month and I still feel like suicidal because it's not enough. Anywho, so imagine a United States where renowned architects clamor to design new public housing, complete with green spaces and daycare centers, where on any given evening of the week, you look forward to stopping into your local library or your local cooperative, food co-op, not only for private nourishment, but to feel more connected to your community and have a sense of democracy. Getting health or childcare or finding a new job is an easy, painless process. So is opening a bank account at the local post office, where you might also go for a small loan or technical support to put solar panels on your roof. If you're a musician or a painter like me, you're eligible for any number of government grants. Wouldn't it be great to actually get to make music and art and have that be my job? Rather than personally having to have a job as an accountant that sits behind a desk and wants to kill himself every day. I'm being a little drastic, excuse me. But seriously though, like when a lot of you came to or met me at a lot of the DSA meetings, we kind of went around and we said, oh, what do you do? And the first thing I tell everyone is I'm a folk singer. That's what I do. But that's not what I do because I can't make any money doing that. But imagine having public spaces where you did that, and then the public who just wants to go enjoy a concert or enjoy art, it's publicly funded. These are all parts, things that are included in the Green New Deal. You can also imagine weekly museum trips, or every American getting to the water or to the woods is a fast, free train ride. And you have plenty of time to do it. We can make this vision a reality in all 3 of the areas that we've explored, guaranteeing good jobs, economic democracy, and a better life for all. We can take courage from the real historical precedents of the 1930s and the 40s, because we've done all this before, and it wasn't that long ago. But the Green New Deal will be even better. So I'd like for you all to discuss with your neighbors here for a second. We have a couple questions up here on the board. Okay, so what's important to you in a Green New Deal? And, more importantly, what can our group, IE DSA, who's hosting this event, what should we be doing? And how can socialists advance the Green New Deal? So, give a couple minutes and everyone talk to your neighbor about these things. All right, cool. So does anyone want to share how can socialists advance the Green New Deal? Anybody? Matt?
Yeah. What motivates me, why the Green New Deal is so important to me is, I love nature. Don't get me wrong, nature is great. But I worry about the humanitarian consequences of climate change. Around the equator, we're going to lose, millions of acres of arable farmland. It's going to cause a massive refugee crisis unlike anything we've ever seen. And unless we, take steps to stop that, the forces of right-wing reaction are going to, rise up. 20, 30 years from now, unless there's a mass movement, they're going to be saying, build the wall and let's put machine guns on it. It's going to be genocide. So unless we start building a mass movement now, and I think that's what socialists need to be doing, is bringing the greatest number of people possible into action against the fossil fuel industry. The future is going to be.
The future might be pretty fascist, is what you're saying, without socialism. Very nice. Is there anyone maybe in the back that hasn't shared that might have an idea of how socialists can advance the Green New Deal? Yeah.
I was really inspired by
Tiffany Gabon, yes.
Yesterday for district attorney with the help of DSA, and I think that our fight is political. It is, again, we need to be, fighting local elections, learning how to win elections, and how to get the power we need to advance these efforts.
Cool, thanks, Jeff. Yeah. You guys are kind of stealing my ideas for the rest of the presentation, but kind of foreshadowing. But yeah, I want to talk about what our plan to win is, and thank you for your comments. But first, let's just kind of summarize. Climate change is happening right now, and it's getting worse every day. A wealthy handful of fossil fuel CEOs and corrupt politicians are blocking progress, but there's finally a solution on the table that rises to the scale of the crisis: the Green New Deal. So, Sunrise's strategy, and well, if there are 3 people in a room, you have Sunrise. So we are Sunrise. Kind of sounds like we're in a church, wherever 2 or more are gathered kind of thing, ironically. So the Sunrise strategy is to expose the urgency of the crisis and to relentlessly demand solutions that we need. But in Inland Empire Democratic Socialists of America, we asked, how can we do this? Well, Join IE DSA. So that is a yucca plant there, very indigenous plant to the Inland Empire. Our kind of takeoff on the traditional DSA logo. Yeah, we have an environmental justice working group, and we come together to strategize and organize for eco-socialism. What's important to understand, and something that's often lacking in environmentalist communities and leftist communities, is that this is a systemic process. It's capitalism. It's the system that we're under that needs to be changed. We need more than just carbon taxes and legislation. I mean, that stuff is important, but we need a lot more than that. So our answer is eco-socialism. Eco-socialists fight for what we call transformative reforms, like the Green New Deal. What makes them transformative? Other than just being awesome policies that makes life better, it takes power from the capitalists and puts it in the hands of us, the working people, the ones who are being exploited by capitalism and by the capitalists. We fight for decommodification, as Jacob said earlier. We fight against new fossil fuel infrastructure and the privatization of public goods, such as land, energy, and water. We fight for a just transition for workers in those fossil fuel industries to green jobs. But ultimately, we fight to transform our relationship to work altogether. We fight to remake our society to correspond with our values, which are justice, democracy, material equity, and a deep understanding of our fates, how they're all interdependent and intertwined with not just each other, but with nature and with all living things and, well, non-living things in the universe. Our work as eco-socialists is premised on a vision of radically transforming society through international solidarity and struggle, often beginning in our own communities at the grassroots level. This is exemplified by DSA's committees nationally with projects like pipeline opposition and socializing and decarbonizing energy systems and community gardens, and of course, fighting for a Green New Deal. But we need to organize a mass movement in our workplaces, in our communities. Like Bernie Sanders says, real change does not come from the top down, it comes from the bottom up. Right? So, next slide, please. We invite you to join us, join our environmental justice working group. We're going to be meeting here at the church in 2 weeks, same time, Wednesday night, 7 p.m., and we're going to strategize together. But we believe that we need to grow a mass movement. So that means talking, reaching out to your neighbors, to people in your unions, if you're in a union, everybody in your community. We need to grow our numbers if we're really going to make demands from those in power. So you filled in a sign-in sheet when you walked through the door, and hopefully you picked up one of these flyers here. If not, please sign that sheet on your way out and grab one of these flyers. And we're going to be keeping in touch with you. We're going to reach out to you, send you an email about our upcoming meetings and whatnot. But yeah, this brings us to the end of our event. I guess some folks from OC Sunrise are here. But before they come up to give a little talk, I just want to thank Adam and thank the Universalist Unitarian Church. Thanks to Eric for filming here and putting this up so a lot of folks were at the first night of the debates. And I'm thankful for everyone that came out here tonight. So thank you guys. Thank you, folks. And I want to thank, we got 28ers here tonight and some folks from 350 Riverside. And hopefully we can build a coalition here. But I think Bobbi Jo has something to say to you folks. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. So thank you, Matt and Johnny and Jacob. And again, everyone else who contributed, Adam in the church, and our technical staff, and all of you all for being patient as we worked our way through there. I did want to recognize that we have a youth leader from Orange County. Isaac came up to me and says, I do some of this stuff in like Sunrise, and I could tell you our plan to so I would love to welcome him up, because some of the strategy with Sunrise Movement has changed simply because we've taken such dramatic action. I can't remember the exact numbers, and maybe Isaac knows how many of the presidential candidates have already signed the No Fossil Fuel Pledge. All of them have and then there's a vast majority of the candidates who have also implored the DNC to have and host a climate debate already, right? Right. And in July, the original plan was to have a mass mobilization at the debates in July in Detroit. And because we already have exceeded some of those goals, the new goal or the new plan of action is to have regional trainings that same week as those debates. And so I think we need to figure out, and this is probably part of the discussion we have in a couple of weeks, of how we have that regional training here and ready to mobilize in the next phases of the campaign as we move forward. We've already changed the debate, and now it's a matter of changing the system that is holding us all captive. So Isaac from Orange County, please come up and introduce yourself and share with us a little bit about what happened and how to win more.
Hello, everyone. I'm not really that good at public speaking, so you guys have to do me a justice for that. I just want to kind of expand on the how we win part of everything, because that is our main goal. And I can tell you now from my own experience working in environmental justice, I'm part of 350 Riverside as well. I joined the Sunrise Movement after actually being one of those kids who was occupying Nancy Pelosi's office. And I can tell you guys from that trip over there, some people have heard my story. Afterwards, Sunrise asked me to give a speech, and I ended up being in a room with the Senator Tom Carper from Delaware, and he was telling me how he was on an environmental committee with, well, first I was giving him the whole spiel of the Green New Deal, what it meant to me and what it meant to my community. And even for me, being a person of color, of not the highest income bracket, being able to speak to a senator and tell him what it meant to me. And then to get shut down by him saying, do you understand who's on my committee with me? Mr. Mitch McConnell. I don't know if you guys know who Mitch McConnell is, but he definitely got $1 million from the fossil fuel industry last year. So he's obviously one of our biggest, I guess, opponents. It was really heartbreaking for me. I paid my way to DC that time. I worked 2 jobs. So I was like, I need some environmental justice to be made. And then to be told that bigger money is running your background government, it kind of was earth-shattering to me. And I guess it brings me back to how we win this. I was on the train thinking, why would I ever think that the fossil fuel billionaires would not be stronger than just one teenager, well, not teenager, a young adult flying to DC and trying to stop it? So what we need is people on the ground floor and actually pushing to make a difference. And this, like they were saying, you need to have those conversations with the people at your workplace. They say don't talk politics at the dinner table. Screw that. That is out the door. We need to start talking about these things. That's how they separate us and how they keep us at odds with each other. We need to start discussing, our pains. Like they were saying, the racial justices, it's all just to separate us. When we come together, we are a Sunrise OC, we went to the Irvine, we had like a city planning meeting and we all demanded community choice energy. The next day, they invited us to brunch to sit down and ask what our ideas were for the community to try to bring in community choice energy and other things for Irvine to lead the way in this. So believe me when I say it is literally on the ground where we make the change. So we need to all just come together. If you guys want to start a Sunrise Inland Empire, I'm here with you guys to help you guys come together. I will join you guys as environmental committee. I'm actually here positioned in Corona too. So thank you guys though. I just wanted to say that.
So, I'm pumped up now, right? Because it actually is going to take tremendous energy. And while we can get caught up in how bad it feels and is, and how many folks that we know are suffering, we really are going to need some creative and dynamic energy, to be able to keep up with the youth that need and want to lead this movement. And so, give yourselves a round of applause for being here. Thank you so much. And I'm not a singer. Jonny is, he's the musician. I am the poet. So I'm gonna share this, and your part is going to be from little things, big things grow. Okay, so from little things, big things grow. I told you I don't have to sing. From little things, big things grow. So you're going to sing it 2 times, okay? And this is where it starts. It starts small. And so gather around, people. I'll tell you a story, an 8-year-long story of power and pride. British Lord Vestey and Vincent Lingari were opposite men on opposite sides. Vestey was fat with money and muscle. Beef was his business, broad was his door. Vincent was lean and spoke very little. He had no bank balance, hard dirt was his floor. From little things, big things grow. From little things, big things grow. The Gurindji were working for nothing but rations, where once they had gathered the wealth of the land, daily the pressure got tighter and tighter, and Gurindji decided they must make a stand. And the Gurindji are the Aborigine folks of Down Under. They picked up their swags and started off walking. At Waddy Creek, they sat themselves down. Now, it don't sound like much, but it sure got tongues talking back at the homestead and then in the town. From little things, big things grow. From little things, big things grow. And you might want to stand up so that you can sway when you sing that part, right? Stand up. Because Vestey man said, man, I'll double your wages. 18 quid a week you'll have in your hand. And Vincent Vincent said, we're not talking about wages. We're sitting right out here till we get our land. Vesti Man roared and Vesti Man thundered, you don't stand a chance in the cinder, you don't stand the chance of a cinder in snow. Vince said, if we fall, others are rising. From little things, big things grow. From little things, big things grow. Then Vincent Lingari boarded an airplane, landed in Sydney, big city of lights, and daily he went round softly, speaking his story to all kinds of men from all walks of life. And Vincent sat down with big politicians. This affair, they told him, it's a matter of state. Let us sort it out. Your people are hungry. Vincent said, no thanks, we know how to wait. From little things, big things grow. From little things, big things grow. Then Vincent Lingari returned in an airplane back to his country once more to sit down. And he told his people, let the stars keep on turning. We have friends in the South, in the cities and towns. 8 years went by, 8 long years of waiting, till one day a tall stranger appeared in the land, and he came with lawyers, and he came with great ceremony, and through Vincent's fingers poured a handful of sand. From little things, big things grow. From little things, big things grow. That was the story of Vincent Lingari, but this is the story of something much more, how power and privilege cannot move a people who know where they stand and stand in the law. From little things, big things grow. 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 Thank you for being here tonight and seeing the vision of what we can create together. And if you want to talk about something that is a little thing and big things can grow, I learned the story of a tree that has now been declared a sacred site, but is still in danger from development here in the Jurupa Hills Valley. It is 13,000 years old. It's the third oldest living organism on the planet, and we can save it. It's only about 3 or 4 feet tall. It's an oak tree, but it is over 70 feet wide, and it has been here since before the last ice age. From little things, big things grow. I encourage you to read about the successes of folks like Vincent Lingari who fought the Australian government for his Aborigine people and restored the land to the people, as we're going to struggle to do here and as we're going to accomplish great things together. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Please, our leaders, our board, Anabelle, please come on up. Matt and Johnny, come on up. And we have buttons for anybody who wants to join and make a commitment to come to our meeting in 2 weeks. We have our Eco-Socialist working group buttons that you are welcome to come and enjoy. And we have information to join and everything like that. Please, everyone, just come. Anabelle, as our co-chair, please just give the folks a good night.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. You know, as Bobbi Jo ended with a poem, you know, this is a little thing that we have to grow into a big thing because we have no other option. Like Matt said, we have 11 years. I have family that are younger kids. It's really disappointing seeing younger kids, our younger generations, know what's up and knowing that adults aren't stepping up to the plate to do it. So that's what I'm doing this for my nephew, and also for my future kids that I'm not having because of climate change. But